This recording is about developing a search strategy, and this helps us clarify our thoughts around our topic and ensure that we include all the different elements that are relevant to make sure the database extracts the materials we need, finds the resources, finds the literature that we're interested in. So the first thing to do is to start designing this strategy. And we have to start with a question. So in what way can the imprisonment of a parent or caregiver impact on a child? This is a topic of interest, and so I've described to myself what I'm looking for. I formulated it into a sentence or question. I'm going to underline the key words and phrases and make a list of the alternative terms for each of them. So my next part is to underline the key words. Here is my question. Here are the key words: imprisonment, parent, caregiver, child. It would be very tempting to include the word impact, but that is a collective term for many different types of impacts. And we may refer to them without using the word impact, so we don't need to use it when we're searching. This becomes a little bit more apparent if I was to ask you to create an understanding or what would be meant if I used the words imprisonment, parent, caregiver, and child. What would be meant by those 4 words? And the chances are we would come up with the notion and understanding that we're talking about how it has an effect on a child. So now we have to look at these keywords and make a list of alternative terms. This link explains a little bit more about that particular point. So our first term is imprisonment, and another word or words to consider when we're looking. In other words, what other words would the author use in order to prevent repetition in their work? Imprisonment, prison, incarceration, or jail, and there may be more. The important thing is we identify these keywords and we think about alternative terms. We then have parent. Well, we could have father or mother, guardian, caregiver, and there may be more. And you'll see I put the or in capitals in between just so that we're clear. We have got that little bit of command language in there. And the third term then is child, teenager, adolescent, if that is the age group that we're interested in. This guide will also help you clarify on this. The second element now is to clarify the search criteria. So, how far back in the literature are we interested? Do we want literature previous to the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 50 years? Or are we thinking we just want to see everything that's written and then we'll come to a conclusion on an appropriate date range, if there is one? Often when we're doing a review of the literature, we need to look at the big picture. But if you have some understanding of the topic and there is good reason whereby you're not interested in material previous to a certain date and you've good reason for that, then you should definitely include a date range. Now, we never impose a date range when we get results and think, oh, there's too many to work through. We always need a robust reason why we've chosen the date. We then have to consider language. So in other words, what language can the articles be in? If I don't speak a particular language, then how would I interpret those materials? The dominant language for research has been English, but many other languages are coming to the fore and research being published in native languages. Remember, it needs to be peer reviewed, but also it needs to be literature that your reader, your supervisor, your marker is content that you have translated, particularly if they have been unable to translate it. So do check to see what language is appropriate. We tend to choose English because it has been the dominant language, but of course you can consider others where you have access to them. We then need to think about the types of literature. We're very familiar with journal articles and we're familiar with books, and we've talked about where we would find those. But we need to consider other resources like statistics. If we need to back up our work or look for material beyond the standard journal and book material, then there are free resources out there, such as Eurostat for the UN, for the European material, the UN Data Archive for UN and agency material, and the OECD data. These are all free resources. Other types of statistics that come from government departments around the world are also available, usually free. It's also worth checking, just as with journals and books, what resources your institution provides for you. There is also a wealth of information available through theses and dissertations. And if I click here, this will take us to the Queen's page, where we've brought together a range of resources, most of which are all free. In fact, on this page, all of these resources, which are noted underneath regions of the world, and here is South Africa and worldwide content, the only one that has a charge is the ProQuest resource. Everything else is free. And from here, you can identify material from any part of the world coming out of institutions, academic institutions, in the form of theses. Dissertations are also included, and there is one thing we need to be mindful of here, and that is the quality of literature from different organisations. So please do bear that in mind. We then have official publications, which I've listed here 4 that take us to particular guides which explain how to find material that comes out of the United Nations. And the others are there as well for the European Union, the OECD, and the Council of Europe. So these are free resources that we would use within the Queen's environment, but there are many more. They're just by way of example. We also have trade or professional based literature, where it's coming from organisations that specialise in investigation. And this is found as some subsets of some of the databases that you search. So it's not always books or journals. You might find other types of material, and it's often referred to as trade, which is an unfortunate term because it's not really trade literature. It's professional based literature coming from professional bodies. Those professional bodies will also carry that literature on their websites. So again, worth searching their material directly. And that final type of material that you might want to consider are conference papers. The material that's listened to, heard about if you attend a conference, but getting hold of it or identifying it if you haven't been to the conference is a little more tricky. But again, some of the databases that you use, you'll notice as a subset of the results, you'll see conference papers are available. So the next area we're going to look at is developing the search terms. And one of the things we do here, we refer to search operators, and one is called truncation. So these are our 3 search strings, and we have imprisonment, but what about articles that just talk about parents who have been imprisoned? We may also talk about prison, but there may be more than one that's referred to, so we talk about prisons. Then we have incarceration and jail. So where we want to include letters beyond the main trunk or stem of the word, we use a little asterisk. And that's a global little figure, little character that we use. So all databases, subscription-based databases will understand it, and many free ones will as well. Parent, with the asterisk, we'll find parent, parents, parental. Father, fathers, mother, mothers. Guardian, guardians, caregiver, caregivers. Child, childs, children, teenager, teenagers, adolescent, CETST. So any word where there would be a main stem and then one or more letters afterwards, it is worth adding the little asterisk. So this will find imprison, but it will also find imprisonment. The next search operator would be phrase searching, and this is again a globally understood option because we use speech marks. So if I search for rights of the child and I don't use speech marks, it will find the word rights 3 sentences away from child. It will find children's 3 sentences away from rights. So to lock the 2 words together where they become the meaning in the way that we need it to be understood, we put speech marks around the 2 or more words. Now we don't do it for a sentence, we do it for recognized terminology. So we would do it for climate change because the word climate has a meaning and the word change has a meaning. But I'm not interested in the meaning independently. I need it to be about climate change. The word rights has a meaning. The word children has a meaning. But independently, I'm not interested. It's only when they're brought together as children's rights that I become interested. So the database needs to know I only want them when they're together. And that's phrase searching. We then have a wildcard. Not all databases use this, but most do. And this is where we have a particular letter where only the letter needs to change in order for the word to change. So instead of searching for men or man, I can search for M?N. In order to search for women or woman, I'll take the E and A away and replace it with a question mark. And the database will know to look for any letter that creates a word, in this case the E or the A. And then we've been doing this a little bit already. We plug in the Boolean logic, and that's where we combine our search terms. So each of our strings to date we used or, but then we need articles that are about all of these. Each of these search strings need to be combined. So we use the and. Now the not is there and we rarely ever use it. And the reason we rarely use it is because if we were to look for material about girls, but we don't want to read material about boys, it would be very easy to say not boys. And the database will understand that. But in so doing, we will have excluded all the literature that talks about girls and boys. So in other words, we'll have lost an element of the literature relating to girls that we are interested in. So we very, very rarely use the not. So let's demonstrate the search. Now core, which I'd mentioned in previous recordings, is a really good research tool, has all good quality content and gives lots of flexibility when searching. So I'm going to click on core. I have it open just here. And I take my first search term and I'm just going to paste it in. Imprisonment, prison, incarceration, jail. The little asterisks are all there and I'm going to click search. Now, of course, that's not what we're interested in alone. We need the other terms. We need to start combining. And you'll see there's a very large number of results, but we're not interested in that alone. You'll see here on core, there's a little option how to search. And it tells us it understands speech marks, it understands and or, and it understands how to group the search terms. And this is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. There are other options here as well. These are the ones that I'm going to use for our search. Because I can now group the search string that I have with those brackets. Add the word and and then add the next search term, a search string. So we have the incarceration, the imprisonment, the prison, jail. And then we're going to say we also need, in the same set of articles, we need to find those that are relating to the parent element of our search. And we close the bracket. Then, because we're looking at it on the impact of the child, we also need to add in that child element. And now we can click search, and the million or so results are down to around 600,000. Now, not finished, because we have that other criteria we need to look at. So the options are along the top. Often databases will present them along the left-hand side or the right-hand side, mostly the left-hand side. But here we do have this option to consider, what field of interest am I wanting to find this material? I can choose it or I can leave it out. That would be part of your inclusion-exclusion criteria. We also have a date range, and what's particularly good here is that the material going back to the 1950s, you can see the landscape of this literature when it started to become very popular, peaking in 2017 with content and then just starting to fall very slightly. Now the fall, of course, in 2019 through 2020, 21 may also have been experienced the impact of the pandemic that we're tailing out of. So worth bearing that in mind. But this is a very nice description, visual description of when a lot of the literature started to appear. And so you can customize this by moving this up and down if you want. You'll see that. So you may have had a date range in mind. You can also look at the type of literature. So if you're only interested in research output, then we're looking at this material. And that will update. And again, if we did want to change that date, I didn't hold that date earlier, then we can do so with whatever good reason we have. And bearing in mind that whenever you're looking at literature, any material that is key to today's literature will still be referred to in the bibliography and throughout the article. So material from the past will still be referred to if it's critical in the present. We also have author option here, language. So you'll see, as I say, most of it is English. For me, I would be choosing English because I don't speak great. I speak some German, but very, very little. So I would just be choosing English because I'm not going to translate anything else. And then we also have a filter here for the publisher if we wanted. And all of that helps bring the results down. There are other ways to reduce the results as well. You could do it by year and say, I just look at the current year and then I'll go back year by year by year and look at it in chunks of years. So it depends just how you want to pursue the searches. But actually, some of this could also be good to consider. There are options on the page. What you need to do is when you're doing a systematic review, you need to note what you have chosen. Pursue this very clinically and make sure you note down every bit of the process. And then you can sort it if you want by recency or relevancy, whichever you want. So in what we've done there, we can move to the next one and say that we test the search terms, and that's what we've done. We chose core, we put our search terms and strings in, and we found relevancy. Sometimes when you're testing, all you're doing is identifying that the search strings actually work. So we've tested it, and now we're also in this journey to find the best databases. So check again with your institution, which databases do I have access to? And then consider the open research, the resources, all of which good quality content can be found. You identify the databases that relate to the other types of material that we'd spoken about earlier. Making a note of all of this. and then you scope. So the scoping is what we did earlier. We tested the results and then we're looking to see what are the results actually like. When we look through these, what do they look like? Okay, from the title, that's all you might need to look at. And then from the title, you can decide whether you want to click and download. So when we're looking at titles only, we're just screening. We're seeing, getting a sense of, is it working? Is it good? Does it look like it's relevant? And all of that is scoping the databases to say, is there something there that's useful for me? And then we can conclude by saying, well, this is where we are with our process. We have our research question, we have got a search strategy, a criteria to decide on date, types of material we're interested in, etc., etc. And then we've scoped the search. We're also making sure we keep a note as we go of all the different elements of what we have done. The search terms, the databases, the date that we've searched, all the things we've clicked on for each database, making sure that it's the same for each where possible. And that brings us to the end of this recording.